Everybody on the Caldwell Ranch agreed on one thing that spring. The donkey wanted somebody dead. They just couldn't agree on who. I'm going to tell you how a 1,400-pound problem named, well, we'll get to his name, taught a stubborn old man more about grief than 40 years of funerals ever managed. But I need you to promise me something first. When you get to the part where I almost put a bullet in him, don't judge me too quick. I've judged myself enough for the both of us, and I've had a lot longer to do it. Stay with me. The truth doesn't show up until you stop looking for the villain. The first time he came for me, I dropped a full bucket of sweet feed and didn't stop running till the gate latched behind me. I'm not a man who runs. I want that on the record since I'm the one keeping it. 63 years old that April, and I'd worked cattle since I was tall enough to see over a saddle horn. I'd been kicked, dragged, thrown, stepped on, and once bitten clean through a denim jacket by a horse that didn't care for the sound of my voice. None of that ever made me run. But there was something in the way that donkey came across the pen head low, ears pinned flat to his skull, teeth already bared before he'd closed half the distance, that reached into a part of me older than reason and just said go. So I went, bucket and all. I stood on the safe side of the rail with my heart going like a roofing hammer, and I watched him. He'd pulled up short at the fence, the way they do, stamping and blowing, a long string of saliva swinging off his jaw. His coat was the color of wet ash, dark down the spine, lighter at the belly. Big for a donkey, a mammoth, the kind people used to breed for guarding stock. Somebody had bought him to keep coyotes off the calves. That somebody had been my boss's late husband, and the husband was 8 months in the ground, and nobody left alive seemed to know one true thing about the animal he'd left behind. "He do that to you too?" Marisol came up beside me, wiping her hands on a rag. She ran the place now. 41, sharp-eyed, carrying a kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. Her husband Tom had been the one who brought the donkey home. She'd inherited the ranch, the debt, and the beast, in roughly that order of difficulty. "Did it to me first thing," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which is a trick you learn or you don't. Came at me like I owed him money. She didn't laugh. She just looked at the donkey a long while, and the donkey looked back at her, and something passed between them that I couldn't read and wasn't sure I wanted to. "Tom loved that animal," she said finally. "I don't understand it. He'd go out there every evening. Used to take him apple cores. I'd watch from the kitchen window." She folded the rag, unfolded it. A nervous little habit I'd notice more and more in the weeks to come. "Now he won't let any of us within 30 feet. I should tell you who I am since you've trusted me this far. Name's Wade. I've been the hired hand on that ranch for 9 years, long enough that Tom and I had become the particular kind of friends two quiet men become, which is to say we worked beside each other for a decade and said maybe 400 words about anything that mattered. When he got sick, I drove him to 2 of his treatments because Marisol had to keep the operation running. We didn't talk in the truck either. He'd look out the window. I'd drive. It was, I think now, the closest thing to intimacy either of us knew how to offer. I keep a logbook, always have. Little water-stained notebooks, one a year going back decades, weather, calving dates, what the vet said, which fences need mending. It's not a diary. I'm not a diary kind of man. But that night I wrote 3 lines, and I remember them because they were the first time the book held something that wasn't a fact. Donkey came at me. Marisol says Tom loved him. Something's wrong here, and it ain't the donkey's meanness. I didn't know yet how right I was. I just knew the math didn't add up. A devoted animal doesn't turn into a monster the day his person dies. Grief makes creatures quiet, withdrawn, off their feed. It doesn't usually make them charge. And it had been 8 months too long for fresh mourning, not long enough somehow for whatever this was. Over the next 2 weeks he got worse. He went after the vet, who refused to come back without a sedation plan and a signed waiver. He cornered the propane delivery man against the tank and held him there, ears flat, for the better part of 10 minutes until I lured him off with grain. He kicked the side off the run-in shelter, actually splintered the boards. A sound like a gunshot that brought me out of the bunkhouse at a dead sprint thinking somebody had an accident with the tractor. The hands started calling him names. The polite one was Diablo. I won't repeat the others. And the thing nobody wanted to say out loud started getting said out loud, in the low, careful voices people use when they're talking about putting something down. He's dangerous, Wade. This was Cole, the younger of the two part-timers, a good kid with more nerve than sense. He had a fresh purple bruise on his thigh the size of a dinner plate. It's not a maybe anymore. He's gonna kill somebody or he's gonna get one of us so hurt we can't work, and Marisol can't afford either one. You know it. I know it. She knows it. I did know it. That was the hell of it. There's a thing that happens on a working ranch that townfolk don't understand, and I don't expect you to either, not all the way. An animal is not a pet. An animal is a responsibility, and sometimes the most honest, decent thing a responsibility asks of you is that you end it cleanly before it ends something else. I'd done it before. A horse with a shattered cannon bone. A bulldog gone in the hips. It is never nothing. But you do it because turning away from it is the coward's mercy, and the animal pays for your weakness with a worse death later. So I won't pretend I didn't think about it. I thought about it the way you probe a sore tooth with your tongue over and over, hatting it, unable to stop. But here's what stopped me. Here's the splinter I couldn't pull out. Tom loved that animal. Tom Caldwell was the most careful man I ever knew around stock. He read animals the way other men read the sky. He'd cull a bad-tempered cow before she ever calved, because he believed temperament ran downhill and he wouldn't keep a problem on the place. In 9 years, I never once saw him keep an animal that wasn't right. Not once. And he'd kept this one, loved this one, walked out to him every single evening of his dying with apples in his coat pockets. A man like that doesn't love a monster. So either I was wrong about Tom, and I knew I wasn't, or I was wrong about the donkey. And if I was wrong about the donkey, then putting him down wouldn't be mercy or responsibility. It'd just be a mistake I could never take back. I started watching him. Not working him, not trying to feed or move or fix him, just watching the way Tom must have, from the far side of the rail in the long gold light after the day's work was done. I'd bring my logbook and a thermos, and I'd sit on an overturned bucket and I'd write down what he did. Cole thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. A grown man taking field notes on a donkey that wanted to stomp him into the dirt. But here's what the notes started to show me, once I had enough of them. He didn't charge at random. I'd assumed he did. That's what made him a monster, the unpredictability. But unpredictability is just a pattern you haven't found yet. When I read back through 2 weeks of scrawl, a shape came up out of the noise. He charged when you approached from his left. From the right, he'd get nervous, tense, back away, but he wouldn't come for you. It was the left side that set him off, every time. The propane man had come up on his left. Cole had been on his left when he got kicked. I'd been on his left that first morning with the bucket. And there was something else. He wasn't running at people, not exactly. He was running at the space between people and the back of his pen, putting himself between them and something. Hurting, guarding, driving threats away from a thing I couldn't see. I sat there in the dark with the thermos going cold in my hands, and I felt the first cold trickle of understanding, the kind that lifts the hair on your arms. He wasn't attacking, he was defending. The question that kept me up that night, staring at the bunkhouse ceiling, was the one I should have asked on day one. The one a younger, less frightened version of me would have asked before he ran. There's a particular silence that comes over a man when he realizes he's been wrong about something for a long time. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles into the chest like cold water finding the low place in a field, and you stand there feeling it pool while the world goes on being exactly as wrong as it was a minute ago, except now you know. I had that silence in me the morning I decided to find out what the donkey was guarding. I didn't tell Marisol. I want to be honest about that because it wasn't my finest hour. If I'd told her what I was planning, she'd have told me no, and she'd have been right too, and then I'd have had to either disobey her or live with not knowing. So I didn't give her the chance. I waited until she'd driven into town for the feed store account and the bank. A 2-hour errand minimum, the way the bank moved. And I went out to the far pen alone with a halter I had no real plan for using, and a heart I couldn't get to settle. The morning was already warm. Grasshoppers ticking in the dry grass. That smell ranches have in late spring, dust and manure and crushed green, and underneath it all, the faint sweetness of the alfalfa in the barn. I've smelled it 40 years, and I notice it still some mornings. The way you notice a song you've heard 1,000 times suddenly land different. He was standing at the back of the pen when I came up, watching me, ears swiveling. I came at him from the right. I want you to understand what that cost because it doesn't read like much on the page. The right side was the safe side by my notes, but safe with an animal that had splintered a shelter wall was a word doing a lot of hopping. Every nerve I had was screaming the old scream, go, go, you fool, run. I made myself walk, slow, talking low, not words exactly, just the sound men make at frightened stock, a kind of murmur that means nothing and everything. Easy, easy now, I'm not the one. Easy. He let me come. His left side stayed turned away from me the whole time, angled back toward the corner, toward whatever was there. And as I got close enough that I could have reached out and laid a hand on his shoulder if my arm would have obeyed me, I finally got a look at that left side in good daylight up close, for the first time since he'd come to the ranch. And I understood everything. The eye was gone. Not gone missing, gone ruined. Where his left eye should have been there was a sunken, clouded knot of scar tissue, gray-white, long healed over. Old damage. Years old, maybe. The kind of injury that doesn't kill an animal but rearranges its whole world. He couldn't see anything on that side. Nothing. A whole half of creation, just black. That's why the left. That's why every single time. Picture it, you're a prey animal and a donkey is prey, no matter how big, bred 1,000 generations to run from the lion it can't see. Half your sight is gone. Anything that comes at you from that dead side appears out of nothing, with no warning, already close. A man with a feed bucket doesn't walk up to you, he materializes at your shoulder like a thing from a nightmare. Of course you charge. Of course you put yourself between the blind side and the herd. What looked to all of us like aggression was the oldest fear there is, dressed up in 1,400 pounds of muscle, and no way to tell us what was wrong. He wasn't a monster. He was a half-blind animal in a world full of things that kept appearing out of his darkness, and not one of us had bothered to walk around to the other side and look. I stood there with my hand finally resting on his shoulder. He let me, and I felt his hide twitch and shiver under my palm, and I felt something come apart in my own chest that I'd been holding together a long time. Longer than 2 weeks, longer than this donkey. Because Tom had known. Of course Tom had known. Tom, who read animals like scripture. He'd have seen that eye in about 4 seconds. That's why he came from the right every evening with his apples. That's why the animal trusted him and only him. Tom had known exactly what this creature needed to be approached where he could see you, slow, predictable, the same way every time, and Tom had done it faithfully, right up until the cancer took him. And then Tom had died with that knowledge locked in his quiet head, the same head that never said 400 words about anything that mattered, and the donkey's whole safe world had ended with him. 8 months of strangers appearing out of the dark. 8 months of nobody knowing the one thing that would have fixed it. We'd nearly killed him for grieving correctly. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my legs ached. The donkey had dropped his head by then, lower lip gone loose the way they get when the fear finally lets go of them, and he was leaning, just slightly, into my hand. The weight of him. You don't know what an animal's trust weighs until it leans on you and you realize how badly it didn't want to be afraid all this time. That's where Marisol found us. I never heard her truck. She must have come back early, the bank maybe. mercifully quick for once, and she came around the barn and stopped dead at the rail, and I turned and saw her face, and I knew she'd taken in the whole picture in a heartbeat. Me, inside the pen, my hand on the animal that had been trying to kill us all spring, and the donkey, calm, leaning. "Wade," she said, very carefully, "the voice you use near something that might break. What in God's name are you doing in there?" "Come here," I said. "From the right, slow, I need you to see this." She didn't move. Her hands had found the rag again. She wasn't even holding the rag. She was wringing her own fingers like there was a rag in them. "He'll hurt you." "He won't, Marisol. Come from the right, I'll show you why." I watched her fight it. I watched 8 months of dread and 1 spring of terror war with whatever it was in her that still trusted me after 9 years. And then she climbed the rail and came across that pen 1 slow step at a time, on the right side where he could see her, and the donkey watched her come with his one good eye, ears forward now, not pinned, forward, and he did not move. I took her hand and I put it on his shoulder next to mine. And then, because there's no gentle way and the truth is the truth, I walked her around to his head and I tipped his halter just slightly and I showed her the eye. She made a sound I've never been able to forget. Not a sob, smaller than that and worse. A kind of "oh" that had the whole floor fall out from under it. "He couldn't see you," I said. "Half of everything just gone. Every time one of us came up on this side, we came out of nowhere. He thought we were." My own voice did something then, and I had to stop it and start again. "He's been scared, Marisol, that's all. He's just been scared this whole time, and the only man who knew it is gone." She didn't cry the way you'd expect. She stood there with her hand on the donkey's neck and her jaw working, and the tears just came down without any sound to them, the way the worst ones do, and she said the thing I'll carry to my own grave. "He came out here every night," she said. "Tom, even at the end when he could barely, I'd have to help him with his boots and he'd still go out. I used to think he was just being stubborn. I used to get angry, Wade. He was dying and he was spending his strength on a donkey." Her hand moved on the animal's neck, slow, like she was apologizing with it. "He wasn't being stubborn. He was the only thing standing between this animal and a world it couldn't see, and he knew he was about to leave. He knew, and he never said anything because." She couldn't finish it. I could have finished it for her, but I didn't, because some things you have to let a person arrive at on their own, in their own time, or the arriving doesn't take. Because Tom couldn't say it. Same reason he couldn't say a lot of things. Same reason he looked out the truck window all the way to the hospital while I drove, and neither of us reached across that seat. There are men built so quiet that love only ever leaks out of them sideways, in apples and chores and showing up. And you don't get the words. You never get the words. You just get the evidence. And you have to be willing to go looking for the evidence, around on the blind side, where it's been the whole time waiting for somebody to walk around and find it. I'd nearly shot this animal. I'd lain awake doing the math on killing the last living proof of what kind of man my friend had been. And the thing that stopped me in the end wasn't mercy and it wasn't courage. It was a refusal to believe that Tom Caldwell had loved something that didn't deserve it. He hadn't, he never did. He just never told anybody why. We stood out there, the 3 of us, a long time in the warm morning, the grasshoppers ticking, the alfalfa smell, the donkey's slow breath going in and out under our 2 hands, and I remember thinking that this exact thing was what Tom had been doing every single night out here in the dark, and that I'd worked beside the man for 9 years and was only now, 8 months too late, finding out who he was. I'd come out to that pen to learn what the donkey was guarding. I had it wrong even then. I thought the answer was the herd or the corner or some animal logic I'd cracked with my notebook. But Marisol said it before we went in. She'd gotten herself back together mostly, and she scratched the donkey under the jaw the way you would a dog, and he leaned into it, and she said it so quiet I almost missed it. "He's not guarding anything, Wade." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "He's been waiting, this whole time. He's been standing out here waiting for somebody to come back from the right side. And I didn't write that one in the logbook. Some things you don't need to write down, you just carry them. What I hadn't told her yet, what I hadn't told anybody, what I'd only half let myself know, was that the eye wasn't the whole of it, because I'd seen something else up close, on that ruined left side. Something under the old scar that didn't belong there. Something that meant this story wasn't finished, and that the worst of what Tom had been carrying out to this pen every night wasn't grief at all. I almost didn't tell her. That's the truth, and I've started this last part 3 times in my head trying to find a way around it, and there isn't one. For 2 days after we stood in that pen together, I sat on what I'd seen, and I told myself it was kindness. Marisol had finally made peace with her husband. She'd stopped being angry at a dead man for loving a donkey. She'd found out he was gentle in a place she hadn't known to look. Why would I take a hammer to that? But I'd spent a whole spring learning what happens when you don't walk around to the blind side, and I figured I'd earned the right to never make that mistake again. So on the 3rd evening I waited until the hands had gone, and I found her on the porch, and I said, "There's a thing I have to show you. On the donkey. And I'm sorry because I don't think it's going to be easy." It was a brand. Old, partial, healed over and half hidden under the scarring around that ruined eye, which is why none of us had ever caught it, and why it had taken me being 4 inches from his face to see it at all. A freeze brand, the kind that grows the hair out white. Most of it was destroyed by whatever had taken his eye, but enough remained. A registry mark, a set of numbers. I'd copied them into the logbook with a shaking hand, and that night, while Marisol slept and I couldn't, I'd done the thing a younger man would have done first and an old scared one does last. I made some calls. I sat in the bunkhouse with my reading glasses sliding down my nose, and I worked the phone the way I used to work a stubborn gate, and by morning I had most of it. He'd been a rescue. Not bought off a neighbor to chase coyotes, the way the story had always gone. Tom had driven 4 hours alone, to an auction lot that the welfare people kept an eye on, the kind of place broken animals go to become dog food, and he'd come home with a half-blind mammoth donkey nobody else would bid $1 on. The eye was already gone when he got him. The records I dug up said the animal had been used as a guard donkey on a sheep outfit, and had taken the injury defending the flock from dogs. Lost the eye doing his job. And his reward for it had been the slaughter pen, because a guard animal that can't see one whole side isn't worth feeding. Tom knew all that the day he bought him. He'd known exactly what he was getting. A scared, half-blind, ruined animal that would be hard to handle and harder to love, and would never, ever earn his keep. And he bought him anyway. And he told nobody the real story. And he went out every single night to be the one safe thing in a world that had cost that creature an eye and damn near his life. I told Marisol all of it on the porch in the long evening light, and she listened without saying a word. And when I finished, she sat very still for a while. "Why wouldn't he tell me?" she said. "It wasn't really a question. 4 hours each way, a whole day, he'd have had to lie to me about where he was." "He didn't lie," I said. "I'd bet you anything, he just didn't say. There's a difference with a man like Tom. He didn't think it was a story worth telling. To him it wasn't a noble thing. It was just the right thing, and you don't go around announcing the right thing, you just do it and shut up." I turned my hat over in my hands. I worked beside him 9 years. He never once told me he counted me a friend. I had to find that out from how he acted, same as you're finding this out now. Same as the donkey did. She made a small broken sound that was almost a laugh. He was impossible. He was, I agreed. He surely was. Here is the part I've gone back and forth on telling you, because it's the part that doesn't tie off clean, and you asked me at the start to stay through to the end, and I'm asking you the same now. We kept him. That's not the surprise. Of course we kept him. We changed everything, taught every hand on the place to come from the right, hung a strand of bright flagging on his blind side so a man's approach never came out of true nothing, moved his feed so he ate facing the gate. He never charged another soul. Within a month, he'd follow Marisol around the pen like a dog. By midsummer, the same hands who'd called him Diablo were sneaking him carrots and arguing over who got to scratch his neck. Cole, who'd had the dinner plate bruise, made him a hat, an actual straw hat with holes cut for his ears. The donkey hated it. We made him wear it anyway for a photograph, and that photograph is on the refrigerator in the ranch house to this day. That's not the part that doesn't tie off. The part that doesn't tie off is this. One evening near the end of that summer, I went out to the pen at dusk, out of habit by then, the way Tom must have, my own boots finding the same path his had worn, and the donkey was standing at the back fence, facing away from me, facing west where the light goes, just standing. And I came up on his right, slow, talking low, and he didn't turn his head to look at me the way he'd taken to doing. He was looking at something out past the fence, or waiting for something, or remembering it. I'll never know which, and I've decided I'm not owed knowing, and neither are you. I stood beside him a while in the falling light. I didn't touch him. It didn't seem like a touching kind of evening. We just stood, the two of us, an old half-blind animal and an old man who'd very nearly killed him for the crime of being afraid, and we looked west at whatever he was looking at. And I'll tell you the truth. For just a second there I half expected to see Tom come walking up out of the gold with his coat pockets full of apples, coming from the right, the way he always knew to. He didn't, of course. But I understood, finally, what it is to love something so quietly that the only proof you leave behind is the shape of the path your boots wore in the dirt. And I understood that I'd been doing it too, all these years, beside a man who never said the word, and that maybe the whole of a life is just learning to walk around to a person's blind side before it's too late to be the safe thing that comes from where they can see you. The donkey shifted his weight, sighed that big rattling sigh they do. The light went. I put my hand on his neck after all, and we walked back to the gate together. I keep the logbook still. Different one now, they only last a year. But I copied 3 lines forward into every new book since, the way you'd carry a photograph, and they're the first thing written on the first page of the one open on my table right now. Donkey came at me. Marisol says Tom loved him. Something's wrong here, and it ain't the donkey's meanness. I was right about that last part. It took me a whole spring and the worst near miss of my life, but I was right. It was never the donkey's meanness. It was just the blind side. It's always just the blind side. And the only thing any of us can do for an animal, for a friend, for a dying quiet man who never learned the words is take the trouble to walk around. Tom knew that. He knew it better than any of us. I just wish I'd found it out, while there was still somebody to come from the right side for.